In the summer of 1943, Adolf Hitler assembled the single greatest concentration of armored Germany had ever gathered for one attack. Nearly 1 million men and thousands of tanks aimed at one bulge in the Soviet line. It was meant to be the blow that won back the initiative in the east. There was only one problem: the Soviets knew it was coming, they knew where, they knew roughly when. And for months they had been building the deepest defensive trap in the history of warfare, waiting for the German army to drive straight into it. This is the Battle of Kursk, the largest armored battle ever fought, and the last great German offensive on the Eastern Front. It was the moment the blitzkrieg that had terrorized Europe finally died, not in a city this time. On open ground, in high summer, in a killing field the Red Army had spent months preparing. After the catastrophe at Stalingrad in the winter of 1943, the Eastern Front had not gone quiet. As the lines shifted that spring, they left a huge bulge in the map around the Russian city of Kursk, a Soviet-held salient jutting west into the German lines, roughly the size of a small country. To a German general looking at that map, it was irresistible. A bulge like that could be pinched off at the neck. Attack from the north and the south at once, drive the two spearheads together behind the city, and you would trap every Soviet army inside it. Hundreds of thousands of men gone in a single stroke. A victory big enough to erase the memory of Stalingrad and hand the initiative back to Germany. That was the plan. The Germans called it Operation Citadel. General Walter Model's 9th Army would form the northern pincer, driving down into the top of the bulge. In the south, the stronger arm, General Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army and Army Detachment, Kempf, would smash up through the bottom. The two would meet behind Kursk and slam the pocket shut. It was the same double envelopment that had won Germany its greatest victories. On paper, it was elegant. In reality, it was the most predictable attack of the entire war. Hitler had a feeling this attack needed to be overwhelming, and to make it overwhelming, he wanted his new wonder weapons at the front first. Germany had new tanks coming: the heavy Tiger, the sleek new Panther, and the massive Ferdinand tank destroyer. Hitler was convinced these machines would smash through anything the Soviets could field. But when his generals wanted to attack in the spring, while the Soviet defenses were still thin, he refused and waited for the new tanks. He pushed the attack back week after week, from May into July. It felt cautious. It was catastrophic. Every week he waited, the Soviets dug deeper. By the time Germany finally attacked, it was driving into defenses that had had 3 extra months to grow. The new tanks were formidable on paper, but they arrived rushed and half-tested. The Panther made its combat debut at Kursk, riddled with mechanical faults. Many broke down or caught fire before they ever reached the enemy. The Ferdinand was a monster, nearly 70 tons of steel with a gun that could kill a Soviet tank from over a mile away. But in the rush to build it, the designers left out one thing: a machine gun. That sounds minor, it was fatal. When Soviet infantry swarmed in close, the Ferdinand crews had no way to sweep them off. Soldiers climbed onto the hulls, jammed the tracks, and set them on fire. Some of the most powerful armored vehicles on Earth were destroyed by men on foot with explosives and courage. While Hitler waited, the Soviets did not. The Soviets did not have to guess where the Germans would strike. The Kursk bulge was so obvious that even Stalin's generals could read it off the map. But they had more than a guess. Through their own intelligence and information passed from British code breakers, the Soviet command knew the shape of Operation Citadel in detail. On the evening before the attack, they confirmed it would begin the next morning, July 5th. So instead of massing to attack, they did something unusual for the Red Army. They chose to stand still and let the Germans come to them. What the Soviets built in those months of German hesitation had never been seen before. Around the salient they carved defensive belts one behind another, not one line but 8, stretching back nearly 200 miles deep. To stop the German tanks, they turned the entire Kursk region into a machine designed to swallow an army. They laid over 1 million landmines, hundreds of them for every mile of front. They dug thousands of miles of trenches. They built hundreds of anti-tank strongpoints, each a cluster of guns positioned to catch tanks in a crossfire. And they did it with muscle. Around 300,000 civilians, most of them women, dug the fortifications by hand. When the Germans attacked, they would not be breaking through a line. They would be grinding into a defensive zone deeper than the distance between cities. The Soviet plan was cold and deliberate. Absorb the German hammer blow, bleed the panzer divisions white, and only then, once the Germans had exhausted themselves, launch the real counterattack. Before dawn on July 5, 1943, the Germans attacked. Almost immediately, they discovered what the delay had cost them. In the north, Model's 9th Army ran straight into the teeth of the Soviet defenses. The minefields were denser than anything they had trained for. Anti-tank guns fired from hidden positions on 3 sides at once. Within a week, the northern pincer had ground almost to a halt, having pushed only a handful of miles. The top jar of the trap had failed to close. In the south, it went better for a while. Hoth's panzer divisions, spearheaded by elite Waffen-SS formations, punched deeper, tearing through belt after belt at terrible cost. Day after day, they clawed forward through mines, mud, and massed artillery, but every mile forward was slower than the last. And every mile drove them deeper into ground the Soviets had chosen. They were advancing, but they were being bled to do it. Ahead of the southern spearhead lay a low ridge and a rail station near a town called Prokhorovka. On July 12, 1943, the German southern spearhead and a massive Soviet armored reserve collided head-on near Prokhorovka. It has gone down in legend as the greatest tank battle in history, a swirling melee of over 1,000 tanks at point-blank range, ending with hundreds of German tanks left burning. For decades, Prokhorovka was told as the day the German panzers were annihilated, up to 2,000 tanks and hundreds of German tanks destroyed. It made for a stunning story, but when historians finally opened the Soviet and German archives after the Cold War, the numbers collapsed. The real figure was closer to a few hundred German tanks and a larger Soviet force, and it was the Soviets who took the crushing losses. Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army lost hundreds of tanks that day. The German SS Corps lost only a handful outright. Prokhorovka was not the German graveyard of legend, it was closer to a Soviet sacrifice, one that still, in the bigger picture, worked. Because that is the paradox of Kursk. Tank for tank, the Germans often fought better and lost less, but it did not matter. The Soviets could absorb those losses and keep coming. The Germans could not. Every elite division worn down was one Germany could never replace. The Soviets were spending lives and machines they had. The Germans were spending an army they didn't. And then, hundreds of miles away, the whole offensive came undone because of something that happened on a different continent. On July 10, 1943, just 5 days into the Battle of Kursk, the Western Allies landed in Sicily. Suddenly, Hitler had a new front opening at the soft underbelly of his empire, and no reserves to meet it. On July 13th, with his offensive already stalling, he called off Operation Citadel and ordered his best SS panzer divisions pulled out and sent west. The largest attack Germany had ever assembled was abandoned less than 2 weeks after it began. But the Soviets were not finished, they were just getting started. This had always been their plan. As Citadel collapsed, the Red Army launched its own massive counteroffensives to the north and south of the salient. This time it was the Germans who were reeling backward. The counterattacks rolled west and did not stop, retaking the city of Orel, then Kharkov, driving the front toward the Dnieper River. Kursk was not the bloodiest battle of the war, and historians still argue about the details, how close the Germans really came, how much Prokhorovka mattered. But on the biggest question, there is no argument. Kursk was the last time in the entire war that Germany launched a major strategic offensive on the Eastern Front. After Kursk, the German army in the east did only one thing for the next 2 years: retreat. The initiative passed to the Soviet Union completely and permanently. The blitzkrieg that had conquered Poland, France, and the Western Soviet Union was finished. At Kursk, it drove into a wall the Soviets had spent months building, and it never rose again. The German army would keep fighting for almost 2 more years, but it would never again choose the time and place of a great attack in the east. That power was gone for good. Next time we leave the Eastern Front for a single morning on the coast of France, the largest seaborne invasion ever attempted, and the hours that decided whether Hitler's empire would be crushed from 2 directions at once: D-Day.